going on, everybody? It's Nick Kosko alongside Pat Mineo. It's our first episode of the Scoop Podcast, the official podcast of the Wrestling Room Forum on Facebook. Pat, our fearless leader, rocking the shirt, rocking the RU hat, of course. I love that too, just because I'm a Rutgers alum, Rutgers guy, broadcast Rutgers wrestling. We do all that. This is our first official podcast of the room. We're going to be doing a lot of good things throughout the offseason, the upcoming season. No matter what it looks like, we're going to do a lot of great things, breaking news, breaking down matches, just doing it all for all those avid wrestling fans out there. Pat, what's going on, man? How are you this evening?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited. It's been crazy off season for wrestling. I feel like there's been a lot of chatter. We got a lot to talk about, and ready to dive in, and looking forward to bringing this to the people, man. It's a fun time. We love the group, and figured we'd throw in some virtual content so that they can get some FaceTime with us, and there we go.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is pretty much how we have to do things right now, just because, obviously with the pandemic still going on, sports are, obviously coming back now. Baseball just came back tonight. So wrestling, college wrestling at least, is up in the air right now. I mean, I wouldn't say quite up in the air, but, there's talk about the season getting pushed back to January. In all likelihood, it's going to happen. Could happen eventually, permanently anyway, just because that could be a better option for the season. But obviously, a lot of places in the country are different with their college decisions in terms of they're going to bring students back or not. And the pandemic, of course, is always ever changing. So we'll just start out tonight. We just to throw it out there for the folks watching this and listening to this, and for our group, the wrestling media coverage in general. And I know we talk, we talk smack, we criticize, we critique, we do all that kind of stuff with certain media members, and obviously what can be done better, what needs to change, and all that stuff. But just a lot of the stuff that's been going on over the past week or so in terms of I would say the culture of just America in general, with all the social injustice going on, obviously the protests, everything. The pandemic's gotten everybody all out of whack. And then now there's more of a focus on, if we're just talking about wrestling, there's an emphasis on men's freestyle wrestling. And it not to be, just to go straight to the point, men's freestyle wrestling it's the go-to for wrestling once you leave college. Sure. Greco doesn't get the recognition it gets, and then obviously women's freestyle doesn't get the recognition it gets. So at least what we can do and what other people can do is just push that narrative forward and say, hey, women's freestyle is great, men's Greco is great. It just needs the coverage it deserves, because if you're going to grow wrestling, you need to focus on all of them post-college.
Absolutely. And you can't, certain outlets, I won't name any names, but yeah, you can't claim to want to grow wrestling if you're not willing to cover those aspects of the sport, right? We have so many great stories and wrestlers that are often in the shadows, and they're out there winning medals. It's not like they're not competing. We have guys in Greco wrestling in the Olympics, and we have women's freestyle wrestlers bringing home hardware. We should be talking about them. We should be hearing their stories, which we have started to, which is awesome. And the media outlets should be highlighting the girls of our sport, the women, those wrestling Greco on top of freestyle, because that's big, man. And Olympics comes around every 4 years. This instance it got pushed, but these athletes put in a ton of time, and they deserve to get that recognition, like you said.
And when you talk about women's wrestling in general, it's a really fast-growing sport throughout the country. I know wrestling has its hotbeds where, you talk about the Northeast, talk about Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, Ohio, Iowa, then you move out west a little bit, California, Pacific Northwest, and then you go down south a little bit, the Texases, the Floridas, the Louisianas of the world, states like that. Wrestling is not as big, but at least in terms of college. But when you talk about what these states are doing now in terms of wrestling growing, women's wrestling is catching on fast. I mean, New Jersey, for instance, was the first state to have its own girls' individual state tournament. Now you see girls wrestling popping up in a lot of different pockets throughout the country as well. Then, you see more college programs now adapting women's college wrestling. For all we know, within the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, however long it takes, I bet you there's going to be a Division I program in a major conference, perhaps the Big Ten, that adapts women's wrestling. And not there's any insight to this, but we'll use our favorite school, Rutgers, for example. They're in New Jersey. New Jersey's got girls wrestling in high school for an individual state tournament. Why not Rutgers be the first one to have a Division I women's wrestling team? All of a sudden, the Big Ten adapts that, and now you're on a national stage if that happens.
Absolutely. And like you said, New Jersey really, in the Northeast at least, set the tone with, the region and the state tournament, bringing those girls to Atlantic City to showcase their skills and having the state tournament. And now PA, it took a little longer, but they're starting to catch on, add some programs. They're a little behind, but, they're starting to catch on. But what they're doing in New Jersey there, and you see wrestlers like Chloe Ayers, right? Princeton coach Chris Ayers' daughter, and what his wife is doing to promote girls wrestling in New Jersey, that whole family. Princeton itself has a female on the Division I wrestling team that could, she practices with them and she competes, which is awesome. So New Jersey and, women's wrestling, they're really working together to showcase that. And you see other states, like you said, Cali has been doing it. They've been doing it for a long time, kind of set the tone. There's some, killer girls out in Cali. And I hope that it continues to catch on and catch fire. And I would hope the big media outlets, start to cover that, right? They need the coverage to catch fire, right? We can't just say, they don't bring in the money, whatever the excuses may be. We need to help cover these women and these girls of our sport so that they can bring in the money or whatever they want to say about that. We want to see, there's obviously a ton of fans who want to see the women highlighted, as you're seeing, whether it's on social media. People want to see this stuff. So the excuses will eventually run out. We got to start covering the women of our sport, Greco-Roman wrestlers, just the different niches in wrestling if we want it to grow. Otherwise, we can't complain that, wrestling isn't big if we're not willing to cover all aspects of it, Nick.
Right. I mean, wrestling is that niche sport. And as you mentioned, you have to grow each niche within the niche sport to make it a more, I shouldn't say global, but more mainstream sport compared to, you look at just using Division I as an example, where if you're just talking about men's, because there's only men's wrestling at a large level in Division I wrestling, but you compare that against, particularly in the Big Ten. Big Ten is the conference for wrestling, right? So you look at the Big Ten, it's football, it's basketball, and then you go wrestling. Then you kind of throw everything else in there, and you can pick or choose whatever is bigger than whatever other sport. But at least for the Big Ten, it's football, basketball. Then you go to the Olympic sports, and then I would say wrestling is at the top because of the quality. We look at other conferences, other major conferences like the Pac-12. It's football, it's basketball. They have swimming is huge in the Pac-12. It's out west. Baseball is big out there as well. We look at Pac-12 wrestling. There's quality programs, but they don't. The whole conference doesn't fill out wrestling. The Big 12, the whole conference doesn't fill out wrestling. You look at a team like I'm just going to throw them out here. Missouri used to be in the Big 12. They're in the SEC. They're in the MAC for wrestling. That just seems so weird. And you're talking about the SEC. I'll use the SEC as an example because they're huge, obviously, with football. They have some great basketball programs, and they're big for baseball as well. We look at the SEC, just looking at a hotbed of wrestling where it just needs to grow in general, not just women's, but in general. That whole SEC area, because we know Florida high school wrestling is big. The college wrestling down there caps at the NCAA, the National Collegiate Wrestling Association, which is basically half the country's club teams. The other half are the Division I programs that are not NCAA affiliated. So it's like there's a lot of pockets in the country that have untapped potential that if you grow it as a whole, all of a sudden women's wrestling is on par with men's wrestling in terms of coverage, in terms of quality. And that's ultimately what you want for one of those sports because, people may say they like men's basketball better than women's basketball, but it's pretty much equal in terms of the exposure from all these schools.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with wrestling. It's tough because we're fighting just to keep programs alive, let alone add new programs. And every little program added, whether it's D1, D2, D3, junior college, that's a victory for wrestling. So same goes with women's programs, right? When you see women's teams being created, even at the high school level, it's great to see that adapting. And I think you made a great point with, the southern states and even the ACC, right? Look at the ACC and how it's come on in wrestling. We could add some teams back to the ACC, right? If we
Clemson for one. How about Clemson getting their Division I program back?
Yeah, get Clemson back in there. Get one of the Florida schools, Miami, whatever it may be. You got Florida who's catching fire with high school wrestling, and they're churning out studs, and it'd be cool to have a program down there. I mean, those schools are awesome, and I think that would draw a lot of appeal. But we need to focus on not only bringing more exposure to those areas we talked about, women's wrestling, but also working to maintain the programs we have and add programs in areas, like you said, where wrestling can become more of a staple, right? If you have college programs down there, that will force people to, say, hey, what's going on? I'm going to follow some wrestling. We have college team in Florida or wherever it may be in the South, Mississippi, Alabama, just to bring more exposure to the sport. I think that would help all aspects, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a side note, can you imagine like the Florida Gators? They had a Division I wrestling program. Can you just imagine that Gator chomp in an arena where every time somebody gets a pin? Oh, that'd be so awesome. I'm just thinking, it's on the top of my head.
A singlet with a gator on it, man. That would be awesome.
I would love that.
It's so cool. But yeah, we, it's tough, man, because we're here. We're losing big programs like Stanford. Hope they can somehow get that back. But we're losing programs in one aspect. Some small programs are being added. It's like wrestling is tough. We're constantly battling, not only the big administration, but sometimes battling ourselves here, because like we mentioned before, if wrestling's not going to be covered in all aspects, we're not doing any favors when it comes to keeping programs, adding programs, and building the presence. So we all need to work together to do that, and we can't make excuses. Obviously business is business, and they're going to do what's best for their profits, but it's not going to hurt them to bring more exposure to those areas, in that regard.
And speaking of business, another one of those big topics that we've been talking about over the past week, Jordan Burroughs, arguably one of the greatest American wrestlers to ever grace the mat. So he is moving from Nebraska to the Pennsylvania Regional Training Center by next year. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's where he'll be ultimately training for his, looks like, final Olympic run in Tokyo, which obviously was supposed to be this year, but now it's going to be in 2021, the Tokyo Olympics. So that's where he's moving. I mean, what was your first reaction when you heard that he was leaving? Where he's been in Nebraska for, I don't even know, over a decade at this point, from college to training. He trained to win his gold medal back in 2012, and now he's changing regional training centers. Basically, now 9 years since his last gold medal at the Olympics.
Yeah, and with Jordan, like you said, Nebraska has become like a home to him. You see it. What he's done with those guys, Manny Snyder out there, and that has become like a home to him. But there's really no place like home. South Jersey, that's where you're at. So Philly, close to home, his roots, where he grew up. I'm sure he has family still back there. And it had been mentioned, I think a couple of years ago in an interview, he said, I hope to someday move back that area. And everyone was kind of like, but where? And now all these RTCs are popping up and blowing up. And, what Brandon Slay is doing at Pennsylvania Regional Training Center is amazing. They're really catching fire right now. You got Mark Hall coming in, McFadden. You got obviously JB now. I'm sure they'll sign some other big names. But at first I was, kind of surprised because of, Nebraska. You figure he's going to end his career, per se, just in Nebraska with Nebraska. But you see a lot of big moves, right? You see Snyder moving to Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, Gilman. People are making changes late in their career to try and make that last push and surge, and I can't blame them. Burroughs, can't blame him for wanting to be back home. I think it'll be a big change, but who knows? Maybe it'll ignite him, and we'll get that another gold that we all know he's capable of. I think it was a cool move, and got to respect it coming home to Jersey. And he left on his terms and gave great respect to the coaches at Nebraska. But it's good to be home for him, I'm sure, soon, right? We got another year or so, and he'll be going, I think, September after the Olympics to officially start training there.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it. You just mentioned ignite that fire in him to bring back, the type of wrestling he had when he won the gold medal, which is now 8 years ago. Because we saw him in 2016. It was a little bit of a disappointing performance because he didn't medal, and we're thinking he's probably going to repeat most likely. And then he falls in an early round. Then I believe he lost in the bronze medal match, or he might have lost before that.
He did lose before that. It was very surprising, and it was tough to watch because he is such a big part of our sport, and we were all gunning for him to get that gold. But it just goes to show with senior level wrestling, whether it's Greco, freestyle, women's, it's very unpredictable. You have people training around the world to beat you for years, for 4 years. every year they're gunning for you. And it's a different style, in folk style and NCAA. A lot of times we can, say, hey, this guy might repeat, he'll probably repeat. But with international style, when people say, oh, like it's a lock, even David Taylor, right? Someone said the other day in the forum, oh, he's head and shoulders above everyone in the world at 86 kilograms. I think he's going to win Olympic gold, but to say that, man, you're underestimating the world, and we don't.
You don't know how these guys are training, across
You
the world.
see the guys in Dagestan training, running up the mountains, getting ready, and all they want to do is beat Americans. So, I mean, Jordan, a lot of people said he's done after that, and guess what? He wasn't. He bounced back, and he won world medals after that, and he's still here. So he's proved a lot of people wrong and fought through that adversity, and I think it's cool that he's going to change it up this late in his career. I mean, he is the GOAT, and he still looks like he could double anyone through a wall. So I expect gold in Tokyo, and then I expect him to come back in 2024 and make a run too. Whether he makes the team or not then, or medals or not, I expect him to continue competing. So it's pretty neat. I think that was a huge story, and a lot of people were, speaking about it for the past, 2 years maybe. And he finally made it official, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah, that would be cool to see him even if he doesn't win gold next year, but if he manages to medal or put in at least a good performance, but he still has enough in the tank where he can train for another 3. And again, it'd be a short window. It'd be 3 years before the 2024 Olympics, unless they decide to say, you know what, we're going to keep the 4-year gap and make it 2025. But either way, if he shows up a good performance in next year's Olympics, I wouldn't be shocked either if he says, I'm going to at least try to go for one last appearance, if not medal, in 24 or 25, however they're going to end up scheduling it. So I think that was one of the biggest stories that we've seen the past couple of weeks, knowing that a big name like that switching regional training centers. We know how regional training centers have been beefing up, losing guys, not trading guys, but like it's almost like free agency where you're trying to sign all these hot new international prospects. It's nuts. So I mean, we can't. So we'll go down a level now here, where we'll go to collegiate wrestling, because obviously that's the big talk of our wrestling reform is college wrestling, Division I. I mean, we'll talk Division II and Division III as well, but Division I, everyone's all on. Everyone's talking about the Penn States, the out west, down the coast, in the Midwest, everywhere. Collegiate wrestling is our bread and butter, and yet we might not have, in all likelihood, probably won't have an on-time start to the season here for the 2020-21 season. Expected to start November. That's as of now, but we know the Big Ten is going to a conference-only schedule for all sports, and it's likely to stay that way for the winter sports. Wrestling, I don't know if they'll get an exception, but they could conceivably do, we'll do the conference-only schedule. They could conceivably schedule local teams to do maybe quad meets or tri meets on a Saturday, bang out a couple of matches, but
like high school.
Oh yeah, like high school. So my big thing about the college wrestling season coming up, I mean, as long as it happens, everyone's going to be happy, and then we'll try to make up for missing nationals back in March. But it's going to be very, very weird this year, because there could be no fans in certain arenas. There could be limited capacity, so maybe those home mat advantages are going to be going away a little bit, and then you're going to see, maybe if you see conference-only wrestling, the Big Ten, I think, is going to beat each other up. It's going to be like a pre-Big Ten tournament before the Big Ten tournament this coming season.
Yeah, that'll be rough, man. The Big Ten only schedule for those guys, because the Big Ten is such a meat grinder. And I think you nailed it. With the wrestling season, unfortunately, realistic expectations, earliest start, January. I had heard about a possible 9-week season. Who knows with everything that's going on? Wrestling classified as, obviously, it's such a contact sport. You're on the mat, you're sweating, similar to football. We're put in the highest risk category, even though it's one guy out there versus another guy, unfortunately. But with everything going on, they're taking those measures. Hope we have a season, best case scenario. I'm thinking a January start, a short season. But, man, to end it how it did last season with no NCAAs, it's like a cliffhanger. Everyone's just kind of still bummed. I can't imagine the wrestlers, guys who were going for a title, and you put in the work all year long just to have it end like that. And it was clear folks in other sports and other areas of life didn't really understand it. They're like, hey, you guys got 99% of your season. Well, in wrestling, it's the 1% that actually matters.
Of course, it's that last 3 days in March. They always say the last 3 days in March.
Yeah.
That's all they
And
talk
it's
about.
a meat grinder. So yeah, man, I hope this season happens. We can only just pray that things get better and continue to get better, and that we have a season, and that these guys can get back out on the mat. I can't imagine, losing NCAAs last year and losing the whole season this year. It's changing kids' careers, trajectory. It's changing programs. We're seeing programs being dropped due to all this craziness. It's going to be a long road ahead, but I think this is where we have to come together, regardless what happens, and continue doing stuff like this where we keep the buzz, we keep the hype, keep everyone engaged and involved, and focus on the right things to grow the sport.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, whatever the college wrestling season looks like, and like you said, in all likelihood, it's probably going to start in January, go to March. Maybe they'll push it back just a little bit, just so they have that full 9 or 10 weeks.
Yeah.
But I mean, for all we know, this could be a permanent move for future years where they go maybe January to April, and then they just push the season back a month and a half, and then they take up all the winter after December, and then they bleed into the spring a little bit, when baseball really starts getting underway for all these colleges and other sports like that, like lacrosse and softball, just to name a few. So, we mentioned weird wrestling seasons, and at least in our little area, New Jersey is going to be, I know you're in Pennsylvania now, but at least New Jersey, it's going to be
Jersey at heart.
Oh yeah, I mean it's gonna be very weird because you saw Governor Murphy of New Jersey. He said that high risk sports, and it doesn't include high school, but the NJSIAA, the organization that runs high school sports in New Jersey, they are an independent organization, so they ultimately make the decisions on how and when the high school sports resume. So Murphy said, okay, high risk sports can resume full contact practice. So basically that means youth, college, pro, but not high school in the middle because of the NJSIAA. So I put something out on social media on Twitter the other day, at least for football, because football, at least from the NJSIAA's perspective, was said to be pushed back. First week of the regular season was going to be first week in October. Now, if you can resume now on normal time, why not at least start practicing for all these fall sports? And then if you have a season, great, you're on time. If you don't have a season, then at least you got summer practices, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I put out just as like kind of half a joke was for wrestling. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen in the winter because New Jersey, the way it is, it's been going up and down in these waves. If you're wrestling in high school in New Jersey, why not start practicing outside right now if possible? I mean, it could be off-season stuff. You really can't go inside for these gyms are still closed in Jersey, but I mean, you can have quote-unquote unofficial practices in New Jersey. Maybe just throw it under like a tent or something, throw a mat down, put a tent out, and start rolling. And then I made that joke where I said, how about in the winter, if you still can't go inside, why not just throw a mat outside in the parking lot, put some like turf around it, and then put some heat lamps in the corners and make sure the mat's heated up, warm up, full gear, warm up, and then go out there and wrestle. Why not?
Some people are like, it's too hot. It's 100 degrees, in the summer here. It's like,
have you ever been in a practice room?
Yeah, practice room is 100 degrees, and it also smells too when you're bumping into guys. So at least you get some fresh air outside, right? But yeah, man, that reminded me when I was younger, I used to go to a camp called Athletes in Action in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, a wrestling camp. It was in the middle of the summer, and we had great clinicians, Olympic gold medalist John Peterson, some other great guys there. And we would put the mats on the bay, and like they would allow us to like wrestle on the mats floating on the bay in Long Beach Island. It was awesome. But that reminded me of it. Probably can't practice out there, but we would be throwing crabs up on the mat, and like I'm sure there's some people who will see this will remember that. But that reminded me of those times. I was probably like 8, 9, 10, 11. But we would go outside and we would scrap outside and have fun and whatever it takes, man.
I mean, we've at least seen college wrestling do the outside stuff. In Iowa, they set the bar with, using Kinnick Stadium and having almost 40,000 people for the Iowa-Oklahoma State duel about 4 or 5 years ago. Then
that was great.
Yeah, then obviously Rutgers did it 2 years in a row, one against Princeton, one against Maryland. And I broadcasted both of them when I was still in college at Rutgers just a couple of years ago. I had, you look at that Princeton match, and I think back to that one. That was – I was broadcasting, but again, my wrestling background stems from middle school, high school, and then club wrestling at Rutgers, not Division I. Because again, I'm not we're not talking about me being that quality is like in another universe. But but when I got to broadcast that match, I'm thinking outside wrestling. I mean, this should be a staple. I mean, I know wrestling's a gym sport. It's inside. It's in the arena. You need to be on top of everybody. But showcasing wrestling outside, just that grows the sport, because you go back to that Rutgers-Princeton match a couple years ago.
It was awesome.
There were 16,000 people in the Rutgers football stadium.
It was a blast, man. And then it was like a doubleheader. Rutgers played Penn State, I believe, that night in football.
They did.
And it was actually a rather warm day for the time of year.
Yeah, and then it snowed at the football game after halftime, which is nuts.
The football game, I was going to say, we had to take our sweatshirts off during the wrestling match. That was a great match. Watching guys like Richie Lewis. I think that might have been Ash and Koladzik's first match. Kolodzik was a freshman. It was overtime, I believe. Right?
It was their first official match, and Kolodzik got the takedown with like 5 seconds left to win by a point. And then of course, Schnolte got his revenge in the tournament later that season. That was their first varsity match, because I think they wrestled twice previously at Midlands when Kolodzik was unattached.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that was an awesome event. Like you said, whatever we have to do to get wrestling back, I'm all in for. I mean, if we have to have duels outside in November,
I'm fine with that.
Let's do it. Wrestlers are a different breed. There's a bunch of guys who would do it, probably most of them. And I talked to a lot of D1 wrestlers who said, as far as going back to the shortened season, they're not too mad if the season is shortened to 9 weeks, starts in January. It's a grueling season.
It's less wear and tear.
Schedule, like you said. You're seeing a lot of guys shorten their season and sit out some matches nowadays to stay healthy for March, because, as we said earlier, that's the peak. That's the 1% of the season that really matters. I talked to some guys who weren't so mad. Hey, if it starts in January, that's kind of cool. More time to get ready and prepare. Don't have to stay on weight as long, and don't have to be as beat up for the final countdown. So, hey, man, I hope it happens.
Yeah, man, me too. And then I remember I was talking to Coach Goodale of Rutgers a couple of years ago. It might have been recently too, just because we've had this conversation before. But when that Rutgers-Maryland outdoor match, that was originally, for people who don't remember, that was originally scheduled for Yankee Stadium, and that was supposed to be a doubleheader with football. And football was also going to play. Football played Maryland anyway when they did the doubleheader at Rutgers, but it was supposed to be at Yankee Stadium. And I asked, Coach, of course, he's a big Yankee fan. And I'm just thinking, for wrestling in general, at least for the Northeast people, but for wrestling in general, can you imagine an outdoor wrestling match, Division I collegiate wrestling, outdoors, Yankee Stadium? You could hate the Yankees, but it's at Yankee Stadium, right there on the field. That'd be crazy.
It's awesome, and I like that. I like that outside the box kind of thinking we've had these past few years with the outdoor matches in football stadiums and baseball stadiums, whatever it may be. Just brings a different aspect to the sport and goes back to where we talk about growing the sport, right? We got to think outside of the box sometimes. So whatever it takes. I love that they plan at those venues. It's cool, and it brings in kind of a different crowd. Some people who may not have gone to a wrestling match, might show up and say, this is cool. This is the unique once in a lifetime event. Let me go, like you said, like it was supposed to be Yankee Stadium. Let me go to Yankee Stadium and see them grapple. That's good stuff.
Absolutely. So we got a couple more things to talk about before we get out of here. This news kind of just dropped before we got on tonight about it. Of course, you saw it right here in the room in our forum on Facebook. Patrick Brucke is reportedly considering transferring out of Princeton. So I'll go to you on that. What have you been hearing about the Patrick Brucke situation at Princeton?
Yeah, and Pat Brucke, he's a beast. He's an animal. We've all seen him, his last official NCAA appearance, grabbed a fourth, and he looked awesome. Was battling some injuries. I know the original plan was to possibly gray shirt this year, was looking to get over that injury. So I don't think he was going to be competing this year. But that was a surprise to a lot of people, right? We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of portal surprises recently. He jumped in the portal. A lot of it probably has to do with, obviously he's going to be getting his degree from Princeton, maybe going to a graduate program at another school after that to use his final year of eligibility. And we've been seeing this a lot, right? You see Seabass get the degree from Northwestern, amazing school, and now he's at RU, and we like that.
Absolutely.
I would love to see Brucke at Rutgers. Honestly, from what I've heard, I haven't heard much, but I know a lot of schools are after him. I think he would be a good fit up in Michigan for what they have going on. I think that fits his major, engineering, great department there. So you may see him as a Michigan Wolverine. I know they have a pipeline to where he's from in Illinois, outside Chicago. They get a lot of kids up to Michigan there. So Pat Bruckey, don't be surprised if you see him as a Wolverine. Or, he may stay at Princeton. It's not official yet. So we'll wait and see. But you see a lot of guys testing the waters with the transfer portal. You saw Kennedy Monday dip his big toe in the portal and then pull it back out a few days later.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe Brookby will stick around. A lot has to do with, obviously the Ivy League, getting his degree, and then deciding what's best for him moving forward. I know he loves Princeton, loves Jersey, so it's nothing like that. If he does leave, I'm sure it'll have something to do with him going to grad school and using that year eligibility to get his graduate degree.
Yeah, no doubt. And also, a lot of times when these guys end up transferring for graduate programs, it's never really about, I want to transfer because I have a year left and I want to go to a different school. It's not always that case, because if they have the right things for him for a graduate program at Princeton, if he's able to do that, then he potentially could stay for a year, as you said. You mentioned Michigan. If that's where he finds his plans fit for his education, then I'm sure Michigan would take him right away. I'm sure there's a lot of programs that can probably offer the graduate program he potentially wants. If this is the path he's going to take, then I'm sure there's numerous schools throughout the country that are going to want to take him. Plus, you mentioned the Ivy League thing, and just real quick, we know the Ivy League for football this year in fall sports. They're getting moved. Football's getting moved to the spring for the Ivy League. Ivy League is acting independently again. Here we go. They're going to the spring for football. So wrestling hasn't been touched yet. Winter sports haven't been touched, but you never know. Maybe the Ivy League says we shut them down and move. Does the Ivy League have a full winter season that's just between the Ivy League? I mean, can you imagine Ivy League wrestling just against each other in the spring when it's not happening during wrestling season? But then, winter sports are weird. They kind of overlap when spring sports starts. So, and if wrestling is delayed anyway as a whole, then maybe wrestling doesn't get touched in terms of the Ivy League perspective.
Yeah, in the Ivy League, like you said, they kind of act independently. Much respect to those schools, the best academic schools in the country.
Of course.
But they act independently and they make their decisions. And I think part of it is with this whole pandemic, right? Students are stuck at home. A lot of guys are taking virtual classes and kind of banging them out and getting those credits under their belt. And perhaps a case of where he's looking to graduate as soon as possible to get that Princeton degree. Who wouldn't? Once you get that Princeton degree in your hand, opens up a lot of opportunities. In my opinion, the best academic school in the U.S., if not the world. Now, once he gets that, who knows where he goes. But the Ivy League, man, like you said, a lot of different aspects from admission to how they operate. Obviously, we don't see the traditional, they can't redshirt. So it's a different scene, and this whole pandemic is shaking things up across the Ivy League, the whole NCAA, and we kind of don't know what's next. But wherever Brookie goes, he'll be a beast. He'll succeed. We'll see him on that podium again. I hope he sticks around in Jersey, man.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so last thing here before we wrap up our first episode, we'll look ahead to and we will drop the name here just because that's what the card is. But the Flow Wrestling's having that freestyle card on Saturday, 2 days from now already. I can't believe it's here already. It is a stacked card. I'll give them that. And it's highlighted by Kyle Dake and Frank Chamizo. It's a big time international match of these two. I believe it's at 79 kilograms, which Chamizo is bumping up for. Which is insane.
Eating a lot of pizza.
Yeah. So they highlight it. Obviously, we at least in our group, we all know what happened with the Pat Downey situation. He was supposed to wrestle David Taylor. Obviously, he went a little off the rails on Twitter. It seemed like so he ended up being removed from the card, and he was in the NJRTC as well. So he was replaced by Miles Martin, former national champ, 4-time All-American from Ohio State.
Awesome.
We're getting another Penn State-Ohio State matchup that he's going to wrestle David Taylor. So this will be a man of an opportunity here for Miles Martin. Other matches, we have Jack Mueller going up against, I'm missing the name now, Rowan Bravo Young. He's going to wrestle him.
RBY.
And then we see Darian Caldwell coming back from he's fighting in Bellator, but he's going to wrestle. He's going to take on Luke.
I can't believe that. I'm so excited for that. I have to give Flo credit for pulling Caldwell back in for a match. And I don't give them credit often, so make sure you guys write that down. There were some women on the card. Unfortunately, there's not. We've talked about that, but bringing DC back, I grew up, wrestled same time, we're a year apart, same county. Our towns bordered each other, Scotch Plains, New Jersey, Rahway, New Jersey. Got to see this kid on the mat since he was like 12, and he's been dynamite ever since. He's brought that fire to Bellator, but that dude's been cradling, spladling, and headlocking people to oblivion since like elementary school. So it's awesome. We all saw what he did in the NCAA, in high school in Jersey. He is just a one-of-a-kind athlete and competitor. And him coming in, I feel bad for Luke Fletcher. I mean, let's be honest. Fletcher is solid. He's solid, and many people might say, well, Caldwell's been out of wrestling for however long. It does not matter. Caldwell's the type of athlete who could probably throw a 75-yard touchdown still. He was an all-state quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
That guy, he's dynamite, and like I said, Fletcher, he's awesome too. It's cool to see him get the job at Pitt. He's going to be out there, training out there, and it's cool that they got this kind of unique matchup. You got Fletcher, short and stocky, Caldwell, who's just all over the place and can hit you with, a headlock, like I said, cradle from wherever. But it might be pretty hard to cradle Luke Fletcher. He's kind of like a short ball.
He is very stocky.
Yeah.
And we know that as well. I mean, we also feel bad for our Rutgers guy, Anthony Ashnall, who was supposed to wrestle Luke Fletcher in this card, but he obviously had to pull out with a minor injury, nothing crazy. He just didn't want to risk anything moving forward.
Absolutely. So, you don't want to risk
we wish our boy the best, and obviously another Rutgers guy, Sammy Alvarez, he has a big challenge. He's got Vito Arujau, the Cornell All-American, but he did not wrestle last year because he took an Olympic red shirt. But Sammy got right back on Twitter, and he said, "I'm going to tech Vito." That's fascinating to me. But I'll tell you what. I mean, he's definitely not the favorite of the match, even though we love Sammy. But that's the first match of the card, and I think Sammy against Vito is going to be very, very intriguing.
Closer than people think. Sammy showed he can hang with the best guys in the country. I mean, that match versus Gross, the match versus RBY, he is funky. As a true freshman, came in RU, caused some hype and excitement for us, and he can roll with the best of them. And Vito, obviously, amazing, incredible wrestler in all aspects, freestyle, folk style. He's just so well-rounded. It's going to be a fun match because they both love to scramble, both exciting wrestlers. So I expect a lot of points to be scored. That's going to be one to watch. And then, obviously, like you said earlier, with Ashnault, we wish him the best on recovering. You can't blame him for pulling out a year like this. And then Dake and Camiso, that is like they're going at it on Twitter. It's hilarious. Dake's talking about like rubbing dirt on your face, like licking trees and like putting like onions under your pillow. I don't know what he was talking about, but protect your body.
He seems like he's going off the reservation. So quickly before we get out of here, let's get our picks in for those 5 matches. So I'm gonna go with Dake. I will go with Taylor. I mean, they're obviously the 2 favorites. In terms of Miller and RBY, I might have to go with RBY here just because, I mean, I know they're all freestyle, but the way RBY scrambles might play it to an advantage here in freestyle, or it could be a detriment here because he could get his back exposed. You never know. But I'm going to pick RBY on the fly here. I will pick I got to go Darian Caldwell. I would love to see Pletcher beat him, which would be crazy, but I think Caldwell's going to win, and then I'm going to go, unfortunately, not our boy Sammy, but I would love to see Sammy win, of course. But I think Vito's going to ultimately win in the end as well.
Got it. Yeah, I'll go reverse. I'll go back. I got Sammy. Got to go with the RU guy. It's our boy.
I'll be repping. Don't worry.
Wouldn't be surprised, if Vito did beat him, but that's an awesome match. And then, of course, as far as RBY and Mueller, I got RBY. He's slick. Mueller's a great competitor, but I think RBY's getting better and better every day. He's hungry. And how could you not get better in the Penn State room? That is a ridiculous room. So I'll go RBY. I'm coming up the ladder here. I'm going to go Taylor over Miles Martin, but I think Miles is a great competitor to bring in. A lot of respect for what he's doing. I'm going to go, obviously, Dake over Camiso. I think he's too big and just too in tune and focused. And Camiso is going to come in, and he's been training in the U.S. Camiso. He goes to the New York Regional Training Center, so he's kind of like Americanized now. But Dake's going to take it to
He's
him.
got that American
show him the
style.
stars and the stripes. Yeah. Camiso trains at like Columbia and at New York, a regional training center. It's crazy. He's like been in America more than he's been back in Italy. But we'll go Dake. Dake's gonna Dake bomb him. He's gonna rub dirt all over him. He's gonna just bring him out of his biome.
Whatever he says he's gonna do.
And then I'm gonna go with my boy DC, Darion Caldwell. I don't know how he's gonna cradle that big neck and core of Fletcher, but he's going to, or he's gonna headlock him, and he's gonna let it all loose. It's so cool to see him come back from Bellator and do this. Much respect to him. I'll go DC, so that covers it, and I'm looking forward to the event, man. Flo put together a nice card. Got to give him props for that. Next time around, let's get some females on the card.
Yeah, we can always stack it up. I mean, I mentioned before in our forum just that, it's kind of like an MMA card, and if you do this more often, it's a good. If there's especially in a year like this, if there's nothing going on, you're able to pull something off like this. Why not put together a loaded event just to get all the eyeballs on it? Because usually in the off season there's high school off season tournaments, there's college guys will wrestle in these freestyle tournaments for the Team USA or the cadets, juniors, wherever they want to do, and they'll just do. In Wildwood they have and now I forget what it's called. They have a Wildwood tournament every year down in June, and that's for everybody.
More at the shore, right?
More at the shore, that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
all this stuff, but if you have eyes on just one event here, I think it's going to be big. So, all right, those are our picks. That's going to do it for our first episode of The Scoop with Nick Kosko and Pat Mineo. He is Pat Mineo. I am Nick Kosko. We'll see you next time. You can catch us right here in the wrestling room. This is The Scoop.
Get Scoop.